Hello, everyone. Welcome to Navigating Work, Life, and Grief Together. I'm Jody Lavoie, your host and founder of the Grief Company and Widows in the Workplace. And today I am thrilled that we have Adair Maynard, the CEO and founder of Memorial Tribute Legacy. And she's going to tell you a lot more about what Memorial Tribute Legacy does and how you can interact with it. But it's a company that's really at the intersection of grief, legacy, innovation, and tech. And Adair and her team are creating meaningful, modern ways to celebrate loved ones through digital memorials and personalized QR code plaques. She also just graduated business school from UVA. She moved to a new location where she's going to start an investment banking job in a couple weeks, as well as continuing to grow her business Memorial Tribute Legacy. And so welcome, Adair.
Thank you so much, Jody, for having me. Really excited
Oh,
for our conversation.
me too. And I love to tell people where we met. We met on LinkedIn. Since this
Mhm.
is on LinkedIn, LinkedIn is such a powerful tool, and
Yes.
and the connections you can make and deepen and grow are phenomenal. So everyone, take advantage of it.
Yeah, just started sending requests for those in the industry that I was really curious about their work. And so really didn't you just cold outreach, got connected, and then shot a, LinkedIn message so that I could learn more about their businesses. So that's how Jody and I got connected.
Absolutely. And I love that. And that's bold of you. Some people are nervous to push that send button.
Hmm.
That's a cold outreach. And I know all of us get those frequently, but
Hmm.
yours was tailored in such a warm way. And obviously, we're working in the same space. And
Hmm.
I enjoy connecting with people in the grief and end of life and caregiving space, all of those surrounding that time in people's lives. So
Hmm.
let's start.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What inspired you to create Memorial Tribute Legacy?
So I'm going to start just with how I grew up and then it'll go into a personal story. So I grew up until the age of 14 as a military brat. So my dad was in the Navy and he served for almost 30 years. And as I basically, was born and then grew up, we were moving every 2 years. And so my family, both my parents, my mom was from West Virginia, my dad was from Kentucky. My dad has a really close extended family, and they were having reunions ever since I want to say 1984. So annual reunions where they would get the family together because his mom was one of 8 siblings. And with these family reunions, they would just bring all the cousins together, try to get everyone to get to know one another and to feel deeper connection with family. And so, as my immediate family was moving around, we wouldn't always be able to make family reunions, but it was always a time that I looked forward to because everyone was really connected and close. And a lot of my cousins, as a result, feel like brothers and sisters. Even as we're moving, my immediate family is, of course, extremely close, but even my extended family, we stay in pretty close contact with and at least try to see them once a year. And so as I was kind of going through growing up, we wouldn't always be back for big life events with family. So weddings, but even funerals. But once I moved back to the States in 2011, then my family started attending a lot more family events. And since a lot of those relatives were much older, because my dad's the youngest and among his siblings by one by 9 years and one by 15 years. So a lot of his his parents, his aunts, uncles started passing away. And so as I was going through kind of my late teens to early 20s, we started going to funerals much more frequently. So by the time now I'm 28, I started attending funerals maybe when I was 16, 15, 16, and I've now been to over 11 funerals. And
Wow.
so it was a part of where I didn't always feel like I got to know some of these relatives because I wasn't going to the annual reunions, but I still really closely valued their presence. And there were so many memories and things where I would go to funerals and I would learn new things about people, like what they did. There's a huge joke online that you don't always know what like your best friends do or your siblings do when it comes to work because you know them in certain facets of life. And as I was always fascinated about this space because I would also volunteer to help out, collect photos and videos from cousins and source different photos for preparation for those funerals, which is a pretty time intensive matter and can be pretty emotionally taxing to prepare for a funeral. And what really started to strike me personally is I had someone who I was very close to within the family in 2023, June 2023, who passed away. Sergeant Corey Maynard, he was my cousin. And the same week that he passed away was the week that I got into business school. And so that was extremely jarring because I had been used to kind of these older relatives passing away, and I still missed a lot of their stories. But then there's so much with Corey where I knew him, just who he was as a cousin. And he hadn't been to reunions in a while because his job had become more demanding, because he was just at that phase of life where he had a family, he had two kids, a wife, and everything was so demanding that we hadn't seen him. And then everything I saw memorializing him after the funeral was associated with who Corey was as a state trooper. And since he was killed in the line of duty, a lot of information going on online about that story. And so I wanted to create spaces then that started to remember people in the different facets of who they were as a person, because we're not all just our jobs or just who we are in one facet. We bring so much different perspective in all of the ways that we show up as human beings in society. So I founded Memorial Tribute Legacy during my time in business school. Initially didn't know what I would do in this space, but knew I wanted to serve the space in some way because I'd seen with Corey where after the funeral, we had collected all these beautiful photos, videos, and had this beautiful large ceremony. Even the governor of West Virginia spoke at it. And then these photos and videos were kind of just sitting on a drive online and weren't really seeing the light of day again. So I wanted to find a way to showcase his memories more. And I wasn't too happy with some of the options on social media to do that. And I've noticed a lot of social media has been moving towards more of entertainment platforms than connection platforms. So I wanted to build something that would, again, facilitate that connection and showcase who someone is to their family, friends, and community.
Wow. So powerful and so much to unpack there, Adair. I have some
Yeah,
questions,
of
and
course.
I'll tell you those photo boards, you know what I'll call
Hmm.
it, from memorials. I had my husband's for
Hmm.
years because they come home and you put them
Yeah.
there and you go, okay, what am I going to do with that? And maybe you display it in your home for a little bit, and then at least I found over time I started putting them away. And then what do you do with them? Because you want everybody to keep enjoying the
Hmm.
photos and the memories and the stories and everything that goes behind it. So I'm thrilled that what you do and your service is here. I want to go back to the genesis. We have the idea, but just
Hmm.
tactically, you have this idea. How did you know? And you're an entrepreneur, in your
Hmm.
bones, I bet. But how did you know what to do? Where to start?
So for a while, I actually had no idea where to start. I was just had this feeling of grief, and I could see my family also facing the same feeling. And when I started in business school, I knew I wanted something that served this space because I felt like I had a lot to bring to the space with experiences being young and attending a lot of funerals. I thought at one point, like, wow, I've attended at that point 10 funerals in the past, 10 years or so. And most people have attended maybe that many weddings at my age, but really not as many funerals and have, faced these topics in life. So I wanted something to serve the space and serve people in it. And as I was joining business school, I also had a lot of just demand on my time with trying to get adjusted to classes, but I've been a little bit used to that because I had done a degree as I was working prior, separate masters just to help diversify my skill sets in the industry I was working in. And so I joined a female founders entrepreneurship group at business school, not really knowing what my offering was going to be. I thought it was probably going to be custom memorials, something that's kind of like publicly facing almost drive links, which in some ways is what my business serves. But I was trying to find different ways to get like engagement with the memorials, get people to remember these spaces. And so the idea for QR code tag plaques kind of came out probably towards December 2023. And I started seeing some in my feeds, and I had thought about what could I do in physical spaces to remember people by. And one thing that is present in all of these new offerings in the space is a lot of them are direct to consumer. They aren't used in preparation for funerals. They're used after the fact, normally given as gifts, so that people can find ways to store their photos. But I know from talking to a lot of my family that I was one of the few who could go through Corey's photos, like more all at once, because it was so emotionally jarring to so many family members of mine, because he had passed away when he was 37, which is, really cut down during some of the prime of life. And I just found that asking loved ones to make these, like, pull together all of these emotional memories, it's a lot to ask in preparation for a funeral. And it's also a lot to ask even after a funeral, when you're just, you don't always have everyone has that focus where they're trying to pull together photos in preparation. So I just wanted something that would better serve the space for loved ones, something that felt like it was a space that they could go and kind of celebrate this joy, and it didn't feel like burdensome to pull together the photos and have to face all these, like crying like crazy as you're trying to prepare for the ceremony, and then even after the ceremony feeling like it's something else that's reminding you of their presence not being there. I just wanted people to be able to go and experience the memories without kind of the tactical work involved with it.
Yeah, and it's a heavy lift
A
of
heavy lift. Yes.
especially today, because if you're doing a physical something that's in the space, most of us don't have pictures printed, so you go and
Hmm.
all of them. And so will you describe, if I go, Adair, I really want to hire you to prepare some sort of visual representation
Hmm.
of my late person. What what happens?
Sure. So initially, we asked, do you have any sort of drives that you currently have pulled together, any photos or any spaces where we can start to kind of sift through the different photos available? Um, if you're like, oh, they're splashed all over social media, or they're on like a private drive, then we basically request access and get added onto those. And then we start going through the photos and seeing what are some of the most high quality photos that can be added to the memorial, and ones where you're not also like replicating almost like the same photo again and again, which we all have multiple takes for photos, right? We want something that feels like you're kind of experiencing new memories as you're going through, and it's curated. So once my team gets added to those, then we start curating the content on the site. We build the memorial page and add some of those initial photo offerings. We also set up a part of the site where it says family, friends, community, submit any additional photos. And then that's a public drive, basically public link that can be shared with anyone in your network. You could share it on social media, you could share it with just anyone, and then they can submit through that. But then the content doesn't get added until our team checks to make sure we compare it with the current content, make sure it's like high quality, and tells a story of the different phases of someone's life. And then over time, we also continue that offering indefinitely after you've paid like the initial cost of the memorial. So we pay the storage for it, and then we also try to, on like an annual basis, maybe like the anniversary of death, we basically come try to find new content to add to the site, and then anyone who is kind of subscribed to that memorial or has submitted to it previously will be sent emails with like, hey, there's some new content on the site, check it out. Is there anyone else, any other, content that you know of? Share this link out and we can continue collecting photos and videos. And then if for whatever reason our customers no longer wanted the content on the site, we can also just export it all to zip file and then send it direct to those who have contributed.
Nice. And then share where the QR code comes into play.
Sure. And I have an example of one here. So this is, we wanted something physical that could connect to our memorials. And it was a trend in the industry I started seeing in 2023. And so, right, here's one for Corey. So it says in loving memory of Corey Maynard. And then this links to his memorial page on Memorial Tribute Legacy. And so one thing I started to notice with those direct to consumer brands is a lot of them have their kind of marketing on their QR code plaques. So they have the name of the business, but then a lot of them don't even have the name of the person who passed away. But it's still linking to, you can go and take a look at their memorial page. And so I wanted to create something that was dedicated to the person who passed away, no ads on the memorial, nothing that was creating a lot of fuss, and was really just a space dedicated to the person with photo and video content that felt really authentic. Over time, we want to have some offerings where people can also, if you have a story about this person, those can get added too. And it isn't just about like, the person, photos of just the person, but it also has storytelling associated with it. So we're starting to do that journey as we're continuing to curate our offerings, and made a few sales mostly with fellow students in business school, a lot of them who were preparing for funerals for those close in their lives and wanted to have this as an offering so they could source more photos, get more engagement with those memorials in preparation and after.
That is lovely because as you're sharing details about the memorial that's coming for your person, to be able to include a link to upload photos, because that's a gift too, because people want to know, what can I do? How can I help? Well,
Exactly.
share any photos that you may have, and here's the link. And
Yeah. And
so
I used to have where people would just directly message me when I was like preparing for Corey's funeral, which was, he was a pillar in his community. So I had random people reaching out to me on Messenger on Facebook, just trying to share photos and things, but we didn't have like a link that we didn't want to share the drive link publicly because it had just a ton of photos within it. And a lot of those tend to be, you don't know what storage space constraints you can run into. You don't know what kind of, how much sifting of content you may have. You may accidentally get someone who uploads things like 5 times over. We wanted something that felt like there were people working on it, and it was also a streamlined experience that didn't continue to fall on loved one shoulders.
And I loved when we talked before about how you can have certain people that you really want to make sure are represented, a sibling or something, and you can help make sure that there's balance, if that is the desire, of the person who's hiring you to create.
Yeah. And even if they, if you want something where it's like, I can't go through my photos on my drive, this is a lot for me emotionally. Well, do you have photos on your social media? Could you just add us to your social media so we could just go through and try to find photos of you two? There's ways where I think with the way we have it designed, we can take some of that burden off, and it doesn't seem like something that's a huge hill to climb for people. We can find ways with where you're currently storing photos to really try to honor their memory, but also your interactions with them.
Nice. And so tell us something surprising that you might have learned from a customer about your product.
Oh, yeah. So, one thing surprising that I learned is that a lot of people they don't care when they get the plaque necessarily. Like they want the plaque eventually, because a lot of them put it on like park benches typically, or they'll put it on the gravesite. But a lot of the times they don't have a lot of acute, like they want it soon. They want just the link and the QR code itself. So I could even do like on basically visual representations that they could put on like a slide deck, right? If I just send the QR code to them, they're okay with that over just receiving the physical good. So that's given us a lot of flexibility with our operations. So we initially have just a laser focus on delivering the memorial and the links so that they can collect the content first. And then the plaque is something that doesn't have as much time sensitivity on it, is what we're finding.
And I didn't think about putting the plaque ultimately on a park bench, or we have a tree in honor of
Yeah.
my husband, and there's a stone at the bottom with his name and a quote, and you could put the QR code on that. You could
Mhm.
have that at your business. If you lost an employee or a leader in the business,
Yeah.
you could have that mounted in the business in some capacity. Uh,
And it's funny you mentioned that. That had also contributed to inspiring me to really want to pursue this field, because I'd worked in manufacturing before business school, and it just had a much older workforce. And as I was there, the plant manager, he had a long-term illness with brain cancer, and so he passed while I was there, and had a beautiful ceremony. But then there is nothing in the spaces where he had served so much time to really like reflect and see who he was,
Mhm.
which I thought was such a disservice, because he had such a just incredibly inspiring story about how he had contributed to that company. And I found it all the time where I would get emails about people who passed away at work, and I couldn't like see photos. It would just be like, an email draft of like, hey, this person passed away. Here's our employee assistance program to help with, if you're dealing with any grief as a result of this. But that is such a disservice to not have more content and collect more content of like who this person was, so that could be shared with their family. What if someone had a good photo of, them doing their job at work, and just wanted to share that with like an aspiring grandson who wanted to work in the same fields? Like that would be priceless to that family.
Very much so. There's so much that can be done, I think, because your cousin was a state trooper. And
Mhm.
I believe when state troopers or firemen are fallen in the workplace, do they put their badge, do they retire their badge on a
Mhm.
wall somewhere? Um,
Actually, he's in DC. There's a police memorial, like a police monument up there. And so when my family goes up to DC, always when we're in this part of town, we will look for his name on the wall, um, which I think is wonderful. Again, it's just his name, but it's something where he made an impact. And there are other spaces where he was very involved in West Virginia that I'm sure they would want something where they could continue to show how he showed up to their spaces. Like during, we just celebrated the 2-year, memorial of his death, and trying to keep his memory going as a celebration of life. And I saw even the library, he would go to the library and read books to kids, in his uniform. And they posted some photos of him reading to the kids at the library. And that was something that his mom really loved and reposted.
oh, that's beautiful. There's so many options that could happen with this. I love it.
Mhm.
And it's what I especially like is people sometimes think technology can be cold. And in the death and dying space, you know, how can you bring in technology? Because that loses some of the personalization, and it doesn't. So I'd love your thoughts on how you've created such a deeply human thing and married it with technology as well.
Yeah. So I think one thing that I tried to do is I was looking at other players who are emerging in this space and trying to think through, how does that align with my experience, like my human experience of engaging with this space? And one thing I found is, you still need a concierge team, people behind it, in order to drive it forward and to get people to really feel like the emotion behind the technology, and not just worry exclusively about, hey, how many sales are we making? All of this. I try to curate our options for people who engage with us, and then give recommendations as we go along, where we really try to engage as partners with the process. So it's been a lot of still maintaining that human customer service aspect, and trying to take feedback and iterate. Like the one feedback we got from one of our recent customers was that they loved the memorial, but they wanted something to allow them to re-engage with the memorial, which is where we started sending the updates. And you can determine if you want updates like quarterly, annually to the memorial site, where we let them know, hey, these are the updates that have been done on the memorial since you last engaged with it. These are some people who have submitted to it, and trying to start that, just ways that we can continue to have them remember it, but then engage with it at their own pace of where they're at with memorializing. And they were overjoyed to see that aspect get added of, they were like, oh, at some point I would love for this to essentially have some sort of like Spotify wrapped of, hey, these are the people who have contributed to it, here maybe where they're located, and the different ways in which they're trying to showcase this person. Like, here's more content about who this person was as a brother, who they were as a professional, who they were as a son. And that's where we want to go, is really starting to show people for who they are in a lot more of their aspects than just one-dimensional aspects.
I like that. It's so high touch, which is important,
Yeah.
especially at this time that people are going through. You need that warmth of the human person that's actually touching all of your special memories that are being
Yeah.
curated.
And there's a lot of startups in this space where I think they are really getting that right in sharing their personal stories of what inspired their business. And then they are trying to design the technology as they're getting feedback from their customers with new features, but trying to really find like what connects you emotionally to this technology, and what are ways that we can also communicate to more users and customers to engage in a way that is really keeping people emotionally connected to, and really providing value in that space, which I think so often we neglect, like how technology can help us emotionally or hinder us emotionally. And so I find a lot of other innovation in the space really focuses on what feeling is this going to create and continue to create with those who use it.
Now, I want to switch to you, Adair. So,
Mhm.
how are you going to balance? You're going to launch your finance career soon in a couple weeks.
Mhm.
How are you going to balance managing your business over here and your finance career?
Sure. So I'll give a little background on what I've worked in and why I'm feeling pretty good about balancing it. So, right after undergrad, I went into manufacturing. I worked as an engineer for 2 years at a 24/7 manufacturing plant, on call all the time. And then, I joined in 2019, and then 2020 hit with the pandemic. And although I didn't lose my job, I had a lot of friends who are engineers there get furloughed. And I noticed this like messaging of like, oh, you like, we're really happy with all you're doing, all the work you're doing. Like, you guys are first responders in a lot of ways to the manufacturing needs of our country. But then also, can you reapply for your jobs? Because we don't know what our certainty with our business is going to look like. And so at that time, I started doing a part-time master's as I was working, a really demanding job. So think like 45 to 60 hours a week with my job, and then a master's that was like 20 hours on top. So I'm very used to like, very hardworking seasons, I would say, of life. And so I'm working in investment banking in Richmond. And what I have a lot of confidence in with my workplace is the people that I was working with were very collaborative. And it was more of a team sport with banking and finance than what I was used to experiencing or what I had heard about the industry. Everyone was trying to find ways to tackle everything associated with the deal. And it wasn't just like, hey, here's your assigned tasks, and we're just going to keep putting things on you. It was a team sport. So I know if, I don't have the bandwidth, or if I need to figure out something, I can get there faster because everyone is so collaborative. And so it's not me starting from 0 to 1 every time with just that kind of work. And then I also have a team for Memorial Tribute Legacies. So my main goal in this past year, since I founded the business last April with just the LLC and then had built the site, was I wanted to have a team of a few people. I have 2 virtual assistants, Anna and Mina, and they help me on the content side, with building out Memorial Tribute Legacies, online presence, SEO, and then my focus has been sales, partnerships, and trying to understand the space better to make sure our offering is good and is serving people. And so really I see it as like it's a long game. Entrepreneurship is a long game. It's not a get rich quick scheme. And just even doing a little bit every day on the side is going to, make bounds in the future. So this is something I'm very passionate about. I'll be able to set aside the time, and it may not be a 40-hour work week, but I may have to be more purposeful about my time working, maybe 5 to 10 hours, trying to figure out what works best with my full-time job. And knowing I have a team around me that can hopefully help me iterate to really great offerings for the industry and continue to learn about the space and figure out what resonates and what doesn't, because a lot of this grief tech space and memorial tech is pretty new and emerging with new offerings within it, only starting in 2020 and 2021. So I'm just, even doing a little bit every day, I think is going to make a huge impact over time.
And what advice would you give to other young people and older people too, any people
Yeah, any people.
any people that have an idea and they just haven't taken that leap to start and create a viable business?
Oh, I always say like action is kind of king, like just do something, start, try to test out, will people buy this? You can even start small. I had a friend in business school where she has had like a cookie business for a number of years and does beautiful custom cookies. And with that business, she just started with doing like, hey, I'm going to do like a Valentine's Day cookie drive. Here's my offerings. Does anyone want to purchase? And then scaled it over time where she started doing more custom orders for big events, all of that. You just kind of start somewhere and see, are people getting value from this? And if people are getting value, like one of the ways that you figure that out is, are people like willing to pay for this or, spending their time on this in any way? And you just kind of start there and figure out if it's something viable that you want to spend your time on. But I do think like action is the first where you need to start. An idea is great, but if you're not iterating on it, testing it with other people, like it is just an idea and nothing is going to come of it. So even it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to, you have to act on something initially. And I always had businesses growing up and had an interest in entrepreneurship. And I always knew just initially my first babysitting job, I just, asked like, hey, do you need anyone to watch your kids? And it was one person in the neighborhood, and they're like, actually, yes, that would be incredibly helpful. And then grew the business from there. So you just start by engaging, start by acting, start by talking to people.
Okay, people out there, take action. That one step, just one step that moves you forward.
Doesn't need to be perfect, but you'll never know if you don't try it.
That's right. I think that's a great place to end. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Adair, for telling your story and sharing more about Memorial Tribute Legacy with everyone. Now, how can they find you?
Sure. So we are on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. I'm happy to connect with you directly if you want to just add me on LinkedIn and we can talk. But I would love for you to follow our site, our different platforms. And then we also have our website, which is www.memorial-tribute-legacy.com. You can also just find it through kind of my LinkedIn bio and all of that. So looking forward to connecting with everyone.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Jody.